Hi, I'm Bill Hitchcock, and it is April 15th. Normally it would be tax day in 2020, but not this year. Today what we're going to be doing is taking a look at some ranking and parts of a whole in Excel. So what I'm going to do is go out to the course website and scroll down here and see if I can find my data set. And that looks like it is... I'll find this yet. All right, here it is. In 2020, it's in the 13th of April, 19th of April week, and it's the ranking textures sales data. So I'm going to click on that file, and it downloads. So then go ahead, save that on your computer, and once you've got it saved, start up Excel, and I've got version 2016 working here. And this is what the data looks like. So, like I say, just make sure you get it saved and we'll get going with it. All right, the first step that we're going to be doing is, quote, we acquired our data. So, I mean, any kind of data set that you want to work with will be fine. This one's just got some sales data. We want to cleanse this data a little bit, check some things out, make sure it's working. So first, I just want to get a feel for what the data set looks like. So I'm going to just start scrolling down here. I've got an order number, it looks like, and it looks like that's just a sequential number, which is good. Otherwise, if you don't have a sequential number for your records, you want to add that in by just inserting a new column and typing in 1, 2, 3, and you can add that in. So it looks like I've got 43 records here, so it's not a very big data set. I'll hit Control and Home and get back up to the top. So that looks all right. Other things that I might want to do, we can adjust column widths and some of that, but for the most part, let's just keep the formatting kind of simple here. So I'm going to take my field names and just hold my Shift key, use my right arrow key to select a bunch of columns going across. I like to use boldface on the headers. So let's click on bold. Let's choose center on the alignment, and I want to choose wrap text, so that way if I've got longer field names, it will wrap them. So there you can see, now I can read order number, I can see order date there, so we've got that information. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to continue to hold my Shift key and hit the End key once, END, down arrow, get all the way down to the bottom, and I want to highlight a bunch of cells around this and just adjust the font size. I don't like to use 11 or anything like that. I like to use either 8 or 9. It gives me a little bit more space on the sheet itself. And then if you can't read those numbers, just come down here to the bottom and zoom up a little bit, and you can make that a bit more readable. But at least for printing purposes and so on, by using a smaller font, it'll help out that way. So I'll hit Control Home again, and we're back to there. Next thing I want to do is I want to do what's called freeze the panes. So right underneath my field names, my field names, order number, order date, region, rep, etc. Right underneath that, I want to click on View, Freeze Panes, and Freeze Panes. And that way, as I scroll down here, I can still read those field names up at the top. So that looks good. Hit Control Home. That'll work for us. Let's see, the order date, those numbers aren't formatted very well, and we want to have these actually look like dates. So I'm going to select all my dates, Shift and down, and let's choose the Home tab. And I can choose some of the built-in formats that they already have here. So if I click where it says General, there's no specific format. Instead, I want to use a short date, or I could use a long date to find out, the day of the week and so on. I actually like to start out with the long date, and then I'll right-click on all these dates, choose Format Cells, choose in the Number tab, I want to choose Custom, and adjust this custom date to just have, I gotta just backspace all this stuff out, 3 Ds, which will give me the day of the week, I don't need this comma, so I'll delete that. I don't want the whole month name. I just want the 3 characters of the month. So I've got Jan 6. The reason I don't like to use the month numbers is depending on if you're in Europe or the US. They reverse month day sort of thing. So this way it's really clear that we've got the month name there. 2 digits for the dates. If you just use 1, it will take and display 6, but then some of your dates kind of line up a little bit funny, so I use 2 D's there, so I get 06, for example. And then finally the year, and we can hit OK, and that looks pretty good for my order date. Let's narrow up this column, and we're good there. All right, for the region, the rep, the item, here we've got the units. For now, these are formatted using a general format, which is actually a good way to start all of your numbers, is format everything with general. So that way you can find out if you've got weird, really long decimal, I should say numbers after the decimal point. So if you leave it as general, you can kind of see what those are. But it looks like for our units, they're all in whole numbers, so that's good. Let's just take these. I'll hit Shift ended down, and I'll cursor down a little bit. Use a comma format, and then I'll get rid of the decimal points. That way, if we'd have units that go over 1,000, we'll get a comma in there, and that's helpful. All right, next I've got my unit cost and total, and again, just kind of paging through this, it looks as though it's all just 2 decimals. So I want to format all those numbers using 2 decimals. Shift and down. And again, we can go down a little bit further. And since they are dollar figures, let's use a $sign format, and we've got that. All right, I'm assuming the total is the units times the unit cost. So I just want to double check that and make sure that, that is right. So I'm going to put in here the calculated total. My calculated total is the units times, here, let's slow that down. Type in an equal sign, cursor over to cell F2, the units, type in an asterisk, so shift and the number 8 gives me an asterisk, and point over to cell G2, the unit cost. Hit enter. Looks like I'm getting 189.05, which is what we had here. Then what I'll do, just to make sure that this is right and I'm not overlooking something, I'm going to put in the diff, or the difference, and take my total and subtract off the calculated total. And I want to actually show this as a general format, so that way I'll catch any decimal errors and so on. So I've got that in here. Let's copy it down, so I'll highlight both those cells. Double click on my fill handle, that little box in the corner. And sure enough, it looks as though all of these numbers did indeed calculate correctly. And then it's a matter of, all right, well, we checked them. We can either delete this out because we really don't need it, or we could just hide those couple columns. I'll leave them in there for now, and just so you can kind of see why we put that stuff in there. Kind of the trade-off here, some people might say, all right, well, why would you calculate the total as well as actually hard coding in the totals here? Well, the reason that you might want to actually hard code the numbers is that might be actually what people paid us for the total amount. And if for some reason these numbers get changed up, we still want to keep those totals. Showing the calculated total will also help us to kind of check anything where somebody might go in, change the units, change the unit cost, and we'll kind of get a red flag when all of a sudden a difference starts to show up. So, yes, anytime you put in a formula, you'll get a performance hit on your spreadsheet. It slows things down. Something has to be calculated here. But really, for these few things, it's not that big of a performance hit. Don't worry about it. All right, I'll hit Control Home, get back up to the top. That looks pretty good so far. I'm just going to go ahead and save this so I don't lose any of my calculations or anything. All right, Other things that I might want to do in the initial setup is I'm going to check my page layout. And I want to add print titles. And right now it says rows to repeat are $1, $1, $1. The reason why we do that is it will always print the field names in row number 1 on the top of every page that we have. I'll look at the header and footer. Change my custom header. There's already something in here, and in fact, in this case, we're going to delete that out of here. Instead, what I would prefer that you put in is on the left-hand section, put in a contact name. So if we're working in a business, we want to have who actually created this report in the first place. So you might put in your name and your title or something like that, so they know kind of, the fact that you did this, but what was your title at the time? So, if you ever get promoted or something else, they might kind of go back to the person whose title this is. So I'll just say I'm a professor of business. And in the center section, I'm going to put in some sort of identifying information, the company name, your department name, etc. In our case, we'll do the course name, BAN 310, data visualization. Let's put the fact that this is being done in the spring of 2020. Over in the right-hand section, we want the date printed, and the ampersand date is just this date tool here, so that way it always uses the current date that our computer thinks is the current date. So that looks good. Hit OK. Down at the bottom, for the custom footer, I've got the file, I've got the page number of how many pages there are in my report, and my sheet tab. That looks pretty good. I'll hit OK. Then I want to test this out. Hit Print Preview. And let's see. Wait for a little while. It looks like I've got, here's page 1. And it's still churning away here. Give me a second. Page 1 of 2. So let's take a look at page 2. And on page 2, I've got the difference. So this thing isn't quite wide enough to display all of that. So what I might do here is I'm going to go ahead, change my orientation, see if I can change the orientation. It's not, let's try landscape here, see if it'll let me do landscape. And sorry, my computer's a little bit slow here. Let's see if it'll do the flip for me. There we go. I still got 2 pages, but notice on both the pages I've got the field names printed up at the top, so that looks good. And we're going to be adding some more columns in here, so this will actually work out pretty well. So I'm going to go back. And save my work. And that looks good. Okay, kind of next major task is really, once we're done kind of acquiring, cleansing our data a little bit, doing some of that initial formatting, we want to begin the analysis. So again, what I always recommend is just kind of go through, get a feel for the data, sort by each one of these columns. So, it looks as though it is sorted by the order number. So if I go to Home and come way over here to the right and choose Sort and Filter, I can either do a custom sort. I'm just going to do smallest to largest by the order number, and then hit End and Down. And sure enough, I've got 43 records. That's all looking good. And in fact, while I'm down here, I'm going to start getting some totals and doing some of that work. So first, what I like to do is I like to count up my records just to make sure that how many I actually have here. So what I did is I typed in equals count parenthesis, cursor up 1 cell. I'll include this blank row in case I ever add any more records. Hold my shift key, cursor up a couple, and then hit end and up arrow. It's all right if you include the field name, because that's just text and it won't actually count that. Just be careful if you ever do the count A function that counts text as opposed to numbers, that will count that first field name, and you might want to not do that. Type in my right parenthesis, hit enter, gives me 43. I'm just going to try to grab the format painter here, so that way the number looks basically the same as all of our order numbers. And there's my 43 records. So let's get the totals. So I want to total up the units, equals sum parenthesis. Same kind of thing, it's just like the count function. I cursor up here a little bit, hit end and up, all the way up to the top. Summing up F1 to F45, hit enter. There are 2,121 units that we've sold during this time period. We can copy that across to the unit cost, the total, the calculated total if you want, and actually the difference as well. And oops, hang on, let me try it again. Copy it and put this across. And for those numbers, we want to use a dollar format. And then we can kind of talk a little bit about some of these numbers that we're seeing here. One is the calculated total, the difference. It's just a quick check to make sure that, hey, do all those differences really equal 0? That's fine. I'm probably just going to delete those things because they're just check figures anyways. The grand total tells us how much we've sold. The total for the unit cost, that number really doesn't mean a whole lot. But what would be better for this is if we did a weighted average. I want to find out for all these sales transactions that we've made, what if we take the 19,000 in grand total and divide that by the number of units to get kind of our weighted average unit cost. All right, so it's just the grand total of your total sales, total revenue, divided by the units. On average, any item that we sell, that's how much it costs, $9.25. So we've got that. Let's save it. All right, hit Control Home. Let's see, let's sort by the next column. Let's choose our dates. So let's sort and filter by oldest to newest. Looks like I started out January 6th, 2018. I go all the way down to the bottom. It looks like the order number is basically the just a sequential number for the date that we have here. So, you know, it goes through 2019. That doesn't look out of the ordinary or anything. As far as what you might want to do with that, I suppose what I could do is I'm going to move my word total off to the side here and stick that over here. And what we could do is we could get our, let's do the averages, the min and the max. Excuse me. So I'll type in equals average, parenthesis, get my averages here for the units. Do the same thing for the minimum. Select all those. Equals max. Come up here. Hold my shift key. Select that range. For the average, I like to at least give 1 decimal point to it. You know, that way it makes it a little bit easier to tell what that number really is. So I'm just going to do 1 decimal point. And then let's copy that across for the unit cost and the total. Those numbers there, we're going to want to use our dollar format. And the other thing that I can do is I can take the minimum and maximum and copy that over for the dates. But then let's format these dates so we can see what was the first and what is the last date, and then find out how many days there is in between it. So I can take my maximum minus the minimum, and it tells me that there's 714 days between those two dates. And we'll just format this with a comma format, get rid of the decimal point here. And it looks like because I changed, I moved some things, so I should probably just highlight all of this, make sure it's all the same font size, set that equal to 9. And again, just, how could you use a number like that, that's 714? I might want to get what's the average daily sales during this. So if I took the total sales divided by the 714 days, and we can find out on average we're looking at about $27 and some change. And we could just put average daily tote, so we know what that number is. Other little things that you can do to kind of add some value to your spreadsheet and have that there in case somebody ever asks you the question. All right, Control Home. Take a look at the regions, sort those. So I've got a central region, east and west. Might do it with the reps. We could do it with the items. You can just kind of check that and do some things. All right. What else I want to do is I want to find out what item did we sell the most of. So if I sort this by units, from smallest to largest, we can see that we had a couple of desks. Looks like I only sold, Smith in the central region sold 2 desks. Somebody else sold 3. Let's go all the way down to the bottom, and we look at the bottom and we see the biggest selling thing are pen sets and pens. 96 units on something like that. So if you'd want to get some rankings of it, what you can do is, the simplest way of doing it is just sort your data. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to column K and type in rank manual, or rank manually. So what I did is I sorted the units. So in fact, let's say that this is the, how about we call it units ranked manually. So I sort by units. Just type in 1, 2, 3. Format those with a comma format. Get rid of the decimals. And double click on the fill handle and carry this all the way. And what's nice about that is now if I ever sort my data back in the original order number, for example, I'll come up here under home. Let's sort by, sorry about that, I did order in descending order. Let's try it in ascending order here. And there's our first order, and in terms of how many units were sold, it was the 41st, which is the 41st highest in this case. Here 50 is we got the number 20. 36 is 17, and so on, and we can just kind of scroll through here. Here was the number 1 in terms of units, the smallest one, and that was our desk, and that got the number 2, if you will. So you can always use a manual technique to do some of the ranking. Advantage of it is there's no real computation involved with it. Because if you use functions and so on, it's going to take up a little bit more computing power. And if you've got thousands and thousands of records, it can make a difference. So I mean, that's not a bad way to approach this. All right, second way of doing it is to use one of the functions, and there's 2 functions for doing this. I'm going to type in the units, and we'll use the RANK.AVG function. And that looks like the following. It's equals rank period AVG parenthesis. It prompts us for a number, which in this case is the units. I'm going to type in a comma. The reference is this whole range of units. So I'm going to cursor over here, shift and down. And I always am going to want to use that range because I'm going to copy this formula down for all the rest of the items. So I'm going to hit function F4. And I want to lock this in with the row numbers, row 2 through row 44. Hit enter. And it's given me a rank of 3. So let's copy this down. And, my ranks aren't showing up the same. Right, well the reason is, if I look at that function, the rank average function, the last part of it has something about the order. And if I type in a comma, I've got an order of either 0 descending or 1 ascending. So if I type in the number 1, there it changes that to 41. In other words, making this in ascending order. And then we can copy this down. And again, some of the numbers aren't quite the same. Like this one, it says 20.5. This one says 17. That's the same, 11, and so on. These 26.5 and so on. Basically, there's two transactions, two orders that had the same number of units. So it averages those rankings out and it says, hey, it's 26.5, if you will. All right, well, I want to be able to kind of flip-flop in between going and doing ascending order or descending order. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click on row number 1, hold my shift key. I want to insert 3 rows above this. So I'll highlight those 3 rows, right-click, choose insert, and up at the top, I want to put in the rank order. I'm going to type in a 0 up here. So then I'm going to change my formula. Instead of this number 1, I want to delete that out and reference cell L2. And then I'll do function F4 because I always want to use L2. And I'm going to copy my formula back down. And that way, if I ever change this number up here from 0 to 1, I can change the way my items are ranked. So 1 being ascending, 0 being descending. So that's the units, the rank average on that one. All right, let's copy all of that. So I'm going to take these cells, I'm just highlighting all of them, and down will be quicker. Copy that over here. And now rather than using the rank average, I'm going to use RANK.EQ. And instead of rank average, we're going to change my formula to be RANK.EQ. And we'll copy this down. And let's see, we'll take a look at this. This one's giving me 5, so let's change the rank order. We'll try it to 0. And, I'm getting odd numbers here. I'm getting 34 and 5 and whatever else. That's because if I look at what it's ranking, when I copied that over, I used to be ranking the units. Now I'm actually ranking the unit cost. All right, so instead of column G, we want to change this back to column F. I want to change this G to an F, this G to an F, but the M2, that's just fine. Hit enter. I've got a number 3 there. Let's copy this down. And let's try changing that rank order to 1 and see how my ranks are looking. So now when I do that, the RANK.EQ looks much more similar to what we had for the rank manual. And in fact, let's take our units and just sort this in descending order, so largest to smallest. And let's see, I've got 96. It started out, it was number 42. That's what we had for here. For this one, it gives me, the manual gives me 43, just because it numbered all those records that we had from 1 to 43. So it kind of arbitrarily just said, you know what, this is our last record, it's the 43rd, even though our units is actually the same. That's what's nice about with our RANK.EQ. It's saying, look, they're both ranked the same. They're both 42nd, if you will, even though there are 43 records total with our data. If I hit end and down, we can take a look at this. You know, here we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Then we've got 2 records that are 7. So on my manual, it just goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. On RANK.EQ, it gives you 5s. The rank average, it just takes the average between 4 and 7 and basically gives you 5.5 to do it. All right, so for all this, ranked manually, normally I wouldn't do it, only if you're stuck because you've got a huge data set, all right? So leave that one out of there. The rank average, RANK.EQ, there's some statisticians that kind of tell you, they argue one way or the other. You can kind of decide on what you want to do. I think most people intuitively understand RANK.EQ just a little bit easier. I would probably just go with that, all right? All right, you could do the same thing for the unit, or for the unit cost and the total. It's pretty simple stuff. Let's just take this. Let's copy all this up here. Copy this one over to the right. Check here. Now I'm using column G, which is the unit cost. So let's just change my field heading here. Instead of unit, we'll say unit cost rank EQ, so we know what that happens to be. And then again, I'll leave this. You know, if you want to flip the rank the other way, just change all these to zeros. And, you know, you can see which one's the least, which one's the most, just by choosing that ascending or descending. The other thing that I would probably recommend for this number, if you're going to include this rank order, is I would go to data and choose data validation. And for the settings, we want to set this to a whole number. And my whole number is going to be between 0 and 1. Those are the only 2 numbers that you can type in. And we'll say, for the title, choose the rank order. And maybe for the input message, choose 0 for, I think it's ascending, 1 for descending rank. And the error alert, we want to set the error alert here. Make it a stop. You know, you don't want to make this just a warning, because if they don't type in a 0 or 1, we're going to get NAs, and we don't want that. For the title, we can just say bad choice. And the error message will be, you must enter a 0 or 1. And we'll hit OK. And if we type in a 0, that works. If I type in the number 2, it gives me an error. You have to type in a 0 or 1. We can type in either 0 or I could type in 1, and that seems to work. And if I copy that one across, I've got the data validation in all 3 of those. So that's all looking good. All right. Save this. Click on column A. Hold your shift key. Cursor all the way over here. Let's double click between these columns. See if we can narrow things up. It looks as though, when I've done that, there's my rightmost edge of the page, so that's going to work in landscape. That's good. I'm going to change this rank order, and I'm going to do merge and center across those. So I'll choose home, merge and center. So that way actually I can probably narrow up these columns just a little bit more now. So that looks pretty good. All right, save your work. We tested some of that stuff out, and that all looks good. All right, other things that I want to do is, back to getting some of our descriptive stats in. Let's go down to the bottom of our sheet. We've got our min, max, and that, so everything looks pretty good there. Let's try out a pivot table. So I'll hit Control Home. I'll choose Insert. Put in one pivot table. Just to do some initial, again, this is all just, beginning analysis that we're working on. All right, as soon as I set up a pivot table, I always look for a metric, a measure. So in this case, I want to get, I could choose the units. Probably the most important metric that I have here is my total. So I want to know, what is our total sales? So I've got the sum of total. It tells me there's our grand total. And I think that's what we computed out before on the other sheet, so that looks good. We use that as a check figure. Let's format this with a $sign. Chances are you really don't need the cents, so I'm just going to decrease that and round that off, or kind of bump it up to 19,628. That looks good. Once I've got the grand total in there and I can verify that sure enough that's what I got on my sales data, and then down, here's that same grand total. Those numbers check. All right, back to the pivot table. Now I'm going to try a category of some type, all right? So for instance, I might try looking at this by items. Or rather than items, let's take a look at this by the sales reps. So I've got Andrew, Gill, Howard, Jardine, and so on. That all looks good. So let's go up to my pivot table tools. And I'm going to add a pivot chart. And it looks like it wants to put in a column chart, which isn't a bad one. But with this one, I think what I'm going to do is, rather than the columns, I'm going to try a bar chart instead. Because I've got those the sales rep names, and I want those going across my screen. So let's choose that one and hit OK. And, not a bad chart or anything. Kind of gives us a feel. I don't really need, since I've just got the one measure, I don't need this legend in here, so I'm going to click on that and hit delete. Get rid of that. Let's see here. I'm going to rename my sheet. So right click on that, choose rename. Let's call it our pivot summary. Let's take that sheet. I like to have the data first and then all my sheets after that. I'm going to click on the sales data. I'm going to choose my pivot summary, choose page layout, choose print titles. That way, the reason I'm doing this is I'll get my headers and footers on both of these sheets. So that should be good. Let's hit print preview and see how things are looking so far. All right, I realize it's churning. You know, it's a little faster processor would have helped here. And I want to change this not just to show the active sheet, I want to choose the entire workbook. We'll give that a try. All right, let's see here. Looks like I've got 4 pages. And let's see if we can get through a couple of these. There's page 2. That's the second part of my data. Page 3. And it's got my pivot table. All right, so let's get back out of this. For some reason, it didn't look like it was displaying out my headers and footers on it. So I might have to add those manually. I guess I didn't select all the sheets. That was part of my problem. All right. So one thing I do want to check here, though, is check the orientation. So if I go to orientation, I'm going to set this at landscape. That way I can make my pivot chart a little bit bigger on here. So I've got a bit more room. So I'll click on the chart. Let's drag this over a bit. That'll help make it a bit easier to see what this is. All right, my total, the chart title isn't the greatest, but the other thing that, more importantly is on my table, my reps are sorted alphabetically. On the chart, it's kind of reverse alphabetical. But what's better on this one is if we go to home, and let's choose sort and filter, and let's choose this, try largest to smallest. And there you can kind of get a feel for, when Stephen Few, I think, does it the opposite way. He goes smallest to largest, so the biggest bars are up at the top. But, doing something like this, you can quickly find out who are our top selling reps, how much is it that they're selling. They're close to over $3,000 each. All that's good information, and we want to have something like this. So that's how we could do something with a pivot summary. All right, another type of tool or type of chart that's actually really useful here is what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back to my data sheet. Better save my data while I'm at it. I'm going to highlight all the reps. So Shift, End, and down. Then hold your Control key because I want to grab all the totals. Right? And the reason I'm doing the Control key is I want to grab non-adjacent cells. Right? So I'm holding my Control key. I click on Total and just start dragging this down. Oh, not that far. Just to the last record there. Come on, come on, come on. Right there. Good. If you have troubles getting that grabbed, just copy and paste those values off to the side, and then you can choose them all at once. All right, I'm going to go to Insert. And if you're using 2016, they've got an option for statistic charts. So I'm going to click on that. And I'm going to choose this one here. It's called a Pareto chart. And I'm going to move this chart location to a new sheet. and we'll call it our Pareto rep chart. Or just, yeah, that's good enough. Yeah, Pareto rep chart. All right, so I've got that in here, and I'm just going to drag this off to the end. And what this chart is telling you is basically, if you can squint your eyes enough, down here at the bottom, it's got the top selling reps. So it kind of automatically sorts and groups all this. And we can see how much they actually sold, going in descending order, all the way down to our kind of marginal reps, if you will, for whatever reason. Maybe they just got hired, right? And then this other line tells us kind of on a percentage basis how much of our sales is being sold by these reps. So, the magic number is kind of like 80% of your sales is made by your top 5 sales reps. And we can kind of look across here and see if that's about true. And it's, well, actually it's out here to Morgan. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, about 7 reps make up about 80% of all of our sales. And then we've got and the rest, right? So it's pretty easy to set up a chart like that. I'm going to do the same thing. We'll try it by items. And I want to find out what some of our top selling items are. So Shift and down to select the items. Hold your Control key. Grab the total, and just this one you're going to have to drag, right? You can't do Shift and down or anything like that. You just got to drag it to select the totals. I went to Insert. I chose the statistic chart and this one here, the Pareto chart. Move it to a different location and change the sheet name to my Pareto item chart. And there we go. So looking at this, it looks like binders were the kind of number one item, and then everything else just kind of falls off after that. So, it's a really great way to get some frequencies, and just it's kind of like a pie chart in some ways, as far as it kind of shows you, what percent of your sales is all done by one area. But, it's, I think, almost a better way of presenting that information. So, getting close to the end here, and I realize this is getting a little bit long, but that you'll live. All right, let's save this.